So today what we're going to do is we're going to give you a bit of an introduction and talk a little bit more generally about ways to use Zoom. And then we're going to talk to you about some updates based on three basic categories, being presenting, participating, and as well as inclusivity, which will also touch on some privacy and security concerns as well, and how those can be addressed with some of the new updates. We'll share with you some resources at the end of the presentation as well, and then leave time for the Q&A. So I'm just going to start with a couple of pages of technical tips to give you a sense of some things you should be aware of about Zoom in general, and then I'll hand it over to Michelle to talk about it in terms of teaching. So in this presentation, we're focusing on the updates that have happened since last fall, all the way till this August. So there was the most recent update, I think, was about a week ago. So if you haven't already done so, you might want to make sure you've updated your Zoom client on your desktop, so that the app that sits on your computer. And you also want to make sure that you remind your students to do the same, especially if they're students that are in, say, second, third, or fourth year. They may not necessarily have updated their Zoom client in a while. So it might be a really good idea to remind them to do so, and to just double check for updates every once in a while. It does automatically update when there's a major update, but doesn't always update every single time. So it's never a bad idea to double check. You should also make sure that everyone in your group is make sure everyone in your group is able to access through SSO. So that means that you want to be signed in using your Ryerson credentials at all times. That will allow a lot of these functions to work better, especially because some of them require you to have to be connected with your email in order to be added to things and things. And then also there are three places where there are settings that you can get to in Zoom. So it can be kind of confusing. The first one being that when you go to the enterprise login that we have for Zoom, so that's at ryerson.zoom.us, you can go to /profile/settings once you're signed in, and there's a whole bunch of settings there. And then there's also settings within the desktop app. And then there's also settings when you're in the meeting. So, and some of the meeting settings you can actually get to just from the desktop app as well, most of them. But just so you know, there's different places where you go for different settings, which can be kind of confusing. But if you're just aware that there are more than one, that some settings might be in one place and not another, it's a good starting place to be in. So if you don't find it in one place, check the other one, that kind of thing. And we'll try and give you an indication as we go through these updates where you'll find the little checkbox you need to check off, or the little toggle you need to switch to on to make it work. And yeah, I can show you in a moment here. Let me see if I can bring that up. I don't know if you can while you're in a meeting, so let me see. Yes, I can. Okay, so on my screen right now, I've slid over there the actual app that's on my desktop. At the top, you'll see there's a little button with or a little icon with my picture in it that I've added. If I click there, you could just check for updates right there. It says check for updates right in the list. So that again is from the desktop application. And then you just click on your little user profile picture or whatever is in the top right there if you haven't added one, and check for updates. So yeah, so you can use it to record your stuff as well as doing things live. And so be aware that you can do what I just did, which was record something, and then you can have it play awkwardly during your presentation. But in any case, it can be used really well as things that you provide to students before class or after class as ways of using it that way as well. So just so you know, for example, we've been using it to record our Podagogies podcast here at the center, and it's been really a great tool for that as well. So it's not just for live presentations, it can be used as a recording tool. So now I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, who hopefully won't have her own voice interrupting her as she's presenting, and let her go from there and talk a little bit about how it can be used in your classroom.
Sure. I mean, it's been a very fun, I guess, year and a half of watching various Zoom mishaps. They happen all the time. And that was the first time that particular one has happened, but I've seen so many. So just to give a bit of like an overview for teaching with Zoom, I'm sure if some of you have been teaching online over the last few semesters, you're familiar with all of this. But if you're new to Zoom, here's a bit of an introduction. So you can use it for teaching in a few ways. You can use it for traditional kind of lectures. So that could be a live lecture where you just, during the time that your class is scheduled, you show up and you present to students with your slides and talk through your content. Or you can do recorded lectures like Sally was talking about that you share with your students in D2L. It's also really good for enabling group work, and we'll discuss later a few of the different features that, that make that possible. It's good for presentations, and that can be from any number of people. So it could be you giving a presentation, but it can also be student presentations where you have them present their work. And that can, once again, similar to how you do your lectures, be the students can pre-record themselves and then just share the file in D2L, like a 2-minute presentation on a topic they're working on, or they can do live presentations with each other in class and give each other peer feedback live. So there's a lot of different capabilities, and it's really it's so exciting, right? Because if you think about it, the capability of students to produce, well, FCAD students, sure, but for most students to have the equipment and ability to produce a short video with captions and a sort of like, talking head kind of slideshow is really quite remarkable that we all, like every student can access that now. You can use it to do demonstrations. You can also use it to bring in guest speakers from outside of Ryerson to come and present to the students. We've heard a lot from faculty members where they've been bringing in people who normally wouldn't be able to take the time out of their workday to talk with students in their class, but have been able to do it because they can do it from their job site or from the hospital, like wherever they're working. You can use it to host virtual office hours or Q&A sessions. There's a TikTok that I'm really very fond of, in which I don't think we have this filter enabled at Ryerson, but you can turn yourself into a potato and you have like your eyes and your mouth show through, but the rest of you is a floating potato. And there's this TikTok that I keep seeing of like an accounting professor, I think, doing his exam review sessions as the potato. And you can just see like his little accountant mustache. And the students are like laughing and turning him into TikToks, and they think he's just the best. So just a shout out for Potato Filter. Should you ever consider kind of making your exam sessions a little bit more exciting. And you can also turn it into an informal place or a study hall or a practice space. And we'll talk a little bit more about the features that enable that going forward. So there's a lot of different interactive activities that you can do in Zoom, which, and Sally will review a lot of the new ones that are exciting. But we just have a little screen here outlining them, and then also showing like how you can do them also in Google Meet, which we, as well have at Ryerson. So for instance, Zoom has its own built-in polling feature. You can also use external polling features that you, polling programs that you can get the students to access from within the Zoom meeting. So for instance, something like Mentimeter or Kahoot. There's an interesting ability in Google Slides to display questions that students can send in via a message to you as the faculty member presenting. They send it into a link and then you can display the question. We can talk about any of these in the Q&A if you're interested in more. Zoom also has a whiteboard feature. And if you are using Google, you can use their Jamboard, and you can share the link to a Jamboard, which is kind of like a whiteboard slash kind of flip chart paper that you can stick like Post-it notes to. You can share that within the Zoom. So there's lots of ways that you can combine these things. Zoom allows you to annotate your slides or what you're displaying on screen, which is an interesting capability. It's easier if you have something like a tablet that you can write on, but you can do it with your mouse or your finger. There's the screen sharing, which Sally is doing right now, sharing her screen, and that's in both Zoom and Meet. In Meet, it's called Present Screen. Breakout rooms, which allow you to sort of send students into different spaces to work together and to come back to the main room, are enabled in both Zoom and in Google Meet. So, you can use them in both places. There's the sort of reactions ability where you can ask students to raise their hand, for instance, if they want to speak. That's both in Zoom and in Meet, so that you can keep an eye out on your class for whoever has a question. And then there's the standard sort of chat function, which you're all happily using now. And that is available also in both Zoom and Meet. So just like, some things to keep in mind at the back of your head as to the basic sort of functionality that allow you to make your classroom more engaging.
So now we'll talk a little bit about what's available to you for presenting. And the first thing I wanted to look at was the idea of the waiting room and then customizing the waiting room. So this is one of those things that's available from the ryerson.zoom.us settings. Again, I'll try and get to this a bit more and see if there's some more questions of clarification for this. It's kind of complicated where all the settings are in Zoom, and I wish we had more control over that, but we don't. Most of the ones that are related to the meetings themselves and how they'll be conducted, you'll find at the ryerson.zoom.us settings. And when there are things that have to do with how you're presenting or your profile, more of those things you'll find on the desktop, but it's a little bit of both. So for example, some of the recording options for local recording, some of the stuff about backgrounds and how you'll be using backgrounds or sharing your screen, those kind of things you'll probably find in the desktop app. But there are other settings that are like, it's confusing. And unfortunately, we didn't create Zoom to make it this confusing, but we try our best to point you in the right direction and help you find what you need there. And if you get really confused and you need some technical support, we'll also let you know that Media Services is available, and their email is avhelp@ryerson.ca. And we have that at the end of our slides as well for those technical questions if you can't find a setting that you'd like to change. So with that in mind, the customize the waiting room stuff is available at ryerson.zoom.us. And one of the things you can do is add a logo, but that can be any image you like. So you can add an image to your waiting room. So if you're using waiting rooms as a space for your students to sort of gather before you bring them into the classroom, I like to enable it because it gives me a moment to set up. It means that I can do all my setup, make sure everything's working before people come in the room, and I can just sort of figure myself out a little bit, and it just gives me that space. And then I just start to let people in. And the notifications for someone being in the waiting room have gotten much better too, which means that you're more alert of who's there and letting them in. And it's pretty easy now just to click a button saying, let everybody in, and let people in as they come. It also can act as another security level. But for me, it's more that I provide a space where they have to wait before they come in so I can be ready. And because of that, you can add other information that sits there in the waiting room that they see while they're waiting. So you can write a little bit of information at the bottom of the screen that they see that tells them, like, heads up, you might want to have this with you, or here's some information about what we're going to do today in class, or here's something you can do while you wait. Anything you'd like to add to that first screen can be really helpful. So the other thing too is that you can send messages to the waiting room. So you can provide links that way. So if you want to provide them a link to something you'd like them to do, for example, you have like a shared Google Doc where you want everyone to contribute something or something like that, or you have a Google form that you'd like them to fill out before you start class, or something else that you'd like them to do, I would suggest sending that as a chat message to the waiting room, because you can send a link that can be clicked on. Any text that you put into the customized waiting room won't be able to be clicked on. So it's just more like a hello and welcome, and here's what we're going to talk about today kind of space. And I have more information about waiting rooms. There's a link there in the slides, but hopefully I think we've worked it out so everyone has access now, and my apologies that we hadn't turned that on yet. Lots of little glitches today as we're all doing way too many things at once.
Sorry, Sally, there is a good question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure 100% because these are, so can waiting rooms be added before the meeting starts? Oh, Chloe's answering. Okay, sorry for interrupting. I just thought it's a good.
Yeah, it is a good question. So what I usually do for my class, I know you can create a recurring meeting. I just create a meeting and give the link to the class, and I just let them have that link and know that that's where the class will be every week. And so there's only one link to the class meeting. I don't make a different one every week. That means if I want to make changes to the waiting room and what it says, I just have to remember to go in and edit those settings in the meeting before the meeting starts, before it gets launched. And as long as that's been edited before the meeting gets launched, I could change them as many times as I'd like. Yeah. So the next thing that has been improved is some options for helping students focus. And I tested this in my own account and forgot this meeting is not in my own account. So these settings have not been turned on, but that's okay, because I'll just explain them here and explain how they're used. The first one is focus mode. So what's kind of cool about focus mode is that anyone who's a host and a co-host, their display will continue to be active, but everyone else will be hidden when you hit the focus mode. And so it's an option under more. So if you have it turned on, which unfortunately I do not, and you click the more button on your toolbar, you'll see an option to just hit focus, and you say focus the meeting. And that's an option that's available to you. Again, it's in the settings at the bottom here. I've put where it is in the settings so you can find it. So it's in the settings at zoom.ryerson.cs under meeting and meeting advanced. and you can turn that on. The other feature that's available there is called Immersive View. So I'm just going to skip to the bottom point here. So Immersive View and Focus Mode give you two new ways of displaying and forcing the display of everybody that's in the call. So instead of seeing the entire gallery view of everybody, they'll see what you've decided for them to see. With Focus Mode, it's just anyone who's a host or co-host will show up. With Immersive View, you can play around with these crazy immersive views as you see the demo on the right-hand side, where you can have like this like sort of weird classroom sort of setup, like a lecture hall with like 8 people showing up with little circles around their heads, and it looks like they're all sitting in a classroom, but everyone's facing forward, so it's a little bit disconcerting. But what it might be a useful tool for is if you have a guest speaker, you could create like a little fireside chat look where you just have the two of you on screen in sort of an immersive view, where you just have your heads like sitting in easy chairs by a fire or something, if that's something that would be of interest to you, to sort of create a scene. And that could be kind of fun. But a lot of the immersive views feel kind of weird because it's like sitting at a boardroom, but everyone's facing forward. It kind of looks like The Last Supper. It's a little bit less than normal. It's a little bit strange. Again, this is one of those sort of beta things that they're trying out. And it's just a matter of turning on the setting in the back end, and then you'll see it available as one of your view options, which pops up at the top right corner of your viewing area in Zoom. And you'll be able to switch to that if you want to as the host. And then as well, in the middle there, I have the spotlight option. So you've always been able to spotlight someone, but now you can spotlight up to 9 people. And so this I can do for you to see. So I'm going to spotlight myself right now. And there you go. Now you're seeing me. And I'm going to spotlight Michelle, who's going to appreciate this. And I can add a spotlight. So now you're spotlighting me and Michelle. And I could also spotlight Chloe. I think it's not letting me add another spotlight right now. It should. Yes, it is. There it goes. So I can spotlight up to 9 people in this call. So if you have people doing presentations in your class, for example, if there's 5 students doing presentations, you can spotlight them and have them be the ones that are predominantly on the screen. Now, when I stop doing the spotlights, it's going to change the view for everybody in the room to the speaker view, which is not the one we usually sit on. So if I, where is it, remove spotlight from myself. So let me just remove all these spotlights. There we go. It's going to stay on the speaker view. And so students will have to manually set it back to gallery view if that's what they want to see. So you'd have to let them know by clicking the view button at the top right. They can go back to gallery view if they'd like to go back to the view they were probably started on. So you just have to let them know about that at the end, that it does switch it to them, and they have to switch it back. But it is a really nice feature. And so the difference between that and the focus mode is that you can spotlight anyone. It doesn't have to be a host or a co-host. Focus mode just makes all hosts and co-hosts spotlighted, essentially. The other option is called pinning. And with pinning, what it is for you personally. So a student can pin anyone they want who's in the call. A little bit creepy. And I'm not sure if there's a setting to turn that off. Maybe we can find out. I'm not sure if Chloe knows. Maybe you can figure that out. But with pinning, it's your own personal view. So if the students want to change their own personal view, they can do so using pinning. It doesn't broadcast to everybody. So Spotlight is a way of broadcasting a view to everybody. That's the difference between those two options. Okay. So the final new thing that I wanted to talk about is using PowerPoint as a background, which may sound like this really great new tool, but it's still in beta and there's still some things I find a little glitchy about it that I'm not totally sold on. First of all, I usually use Google Slides now. There's a lot of reasons why it's just easier to share slides with my students and give them view-only access, for example. It has almost all the same functionalities as PowerPoint, and I can get to them anywhere. You don't have to worry about being on my computer. So I have found that helpful. So maybe you've switched over to Slides as well. If you have, what you can do is use Slides to prepare everything and then just download a PowerPoint version of it before you start to present. But it only works with a PowerPoint file that's sitting on your computer. And it works through the share screen option. So I have a set that I'm going to try and show for you in a second. But basically, the issue is the recording. So it'll look fine when you're presenting in the class, but the way it records, it won't record. It'll either record just the slides without you over top of them, or it will record you and your background, but only the portion where your camera is overlaid. So if you keep yourself tiny in the corner, the only part of your PowerPoint that you'll see is the tiny corner of your PowerPoint. It won't show the entire PowerPoint. So it's best if you plan on recording to drag out the camera that's overlaying your slides to make sure it's full so that the slides will show in the recording. And that's what the steps I have there go through. So if this is something you are interested in trying out and you want to be able to share with your students afterwards, a recording where you actually see you and the slides, I highly recommend going through those steps, setting it up and recording and checking it out. So I can show you what I mean here in terms of the recording. This is probably what we heard playing, but from my computer a minute ago. So I've muted it, so it shouldn't be as annoying this time. Oh, hold on, I might have to refresh it. Here we go. And you'll see that this is what you see of my slides, which is not all the slides, if I leave it as it defaults when it first loads up. So what I end up doing is dragging it out so that you see the slides and everything behind me, and making myself larger. So what I've done is created a slide template that allows me to be large on one side and not obstruct the text on the screen. And so that is what the link is here in the slides that you can see. I'll try just doing it now in the actual thing. So I'm going to hit new share. And this time I'm going to go to advanced and go to PowerPoint background. It'll just take a moment to load. So this is, again, one of those things why I'd want a waiting room so I could set this all up before my students join. See if this works. It's still preparing. It's doing a lot of thinking. Have I overloaded my computer? There we go. And so I show up kind of tiny in the side. I just want to zoom in. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in all the way. Can everyone see me okay with the slides?
Yes, all good.
Yes.
Okay. And then I can't actually zoom in all the way because then I can't get to the controls to change the slide. So you have to make yourself a little smaller than that. So you have to leave a little bit of room for cutoff around the slide. So that's what I've done in this template. And then I can go through and I can change the slides here and I can point to things and show you stuff. And just a tip too, that you can actually mirror your camera. I'm not sure if you can mirror your camera when you're in this actual view, but if you do mirror your camera, know that it's not mirrored for the people who are looking at you. It's just for your own personal view of yourself so that you're not, pointing in one direction, but thinking you're pointing in the other. The mirror helps you actually perform in front of the camera a bit better, but doesn't flip the presentation for those watching on their end.
Sally,
Yeah.
maybe it's a good point, and rather than waiting, how did you zoom in and where the spotlight option is?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can, here, let's see if I do it this way. So when I first pop up, I'm like this. And when you are using, oh, I actually don't know if you can see me here. I can't do this and share it, unfortunately, because I'm doing the share slide. But basically what happens is there's a bounding box around my image and I can click and drag that bounding box to make it bigger. So it's just a click and drag and it's displayed on the screen for me as I'm doing this. So it's hard to describe, but basically my slides are showing up full screen behind me. And then there's a box around me that I can drag to adjust. And so if you try this out, you'll get the chance to see it, but it's really hard. I can't display it for you, unfortunately, because I can't do a screen share and share my slides at the same time.
And can you see yourself by presenting with the background?
Yeah, it's actually bringing me up full screen right now. So it's switched me over to speaker view on the slide where I was having the gallery view. So it switched it over and I can see myself on top of my slides. Yeah.
And I'll say, like, just to jump in there, Sally, it's like Sally said, it's hard to often show how to do these things when you're screen sharing in Zoom because you can't see the controls of the other person in Zoom. So it's hard to demo. But one thing that I've been saying over and over again, and it's what Sally and I did to prepare for this workshop, is to just set up a Zoom with all the settings that you're interested in turned on. Like, just go into the settings in your Zoom account, press all the buttons, set up a Zoom, invite your colleagues or some family members or friends to it, and then just like practice turning on the, present with PowerPoint setting and see how it works and see it. You'll see exactly how the little bounding box works and making yourself bigger and smaller as soon as you turned it on and try it. And that's really the only, probably the best way to see how all these things work. Sally and I had like a great time trying on all those immersive few backgrounds and, dropping people's heads into different spots in fake classrooms and things like that. So it really just makes it easier to see how everything works. So I'd really recommend, just testing out all these things on your own and see how easy they are to actually enable.
Absolutely. And one thing that is new in Zoom is it didn't used to be that you could share anything of your Zoom screens with people. So if you were to drag, like, I don't know, the poll results, if you were watching the poll results coming in live, you had to share the poll results with everybody by clicking the share button. Now you can actually share that little window where they're all coming up in live. You can slide it over to your screen share. So if you're sharing your screen, I have a dual display, so this works for me. So I'm displaying my second screen for the presentation. I can actually drag components from Zoom over on top and you can see them because I have that setting now set up in my Zoom settings where it says I'm allowing the Zoom windows to show in my screen share. So that is an option, especially if you're using a dual display when you're presenting, which if you can get it, I would highly recommend. It makes such a difference. I can see the chat, I can see the gallery view, and I can see my slides all at once because I have my slides on one screen and Zoom open on the other. And you can do things like if you want students to use certain features within Zoom, you can share those features on the screen and show them how they work, which is kind of cool. And that's a brand new thing in the last few months, I think, available in Zoom. Oops, let me just go back again. Just to double check I got everything. I believe I did. So so those are your options to try out different ways of displaying information to people during the thing. And now we're going to switch over to participation. And I believe I'm handing it back over to Michelle to go over some basics of participation with you.
Oh, Sally, we just had one more question.
Oh, sure.
Where the spotlight option is.
Yeah, let's see if I can make that happen in our show here. So we were going to see each other. Warning. So you guys can now see like a hall of mirrors probably. So if I go over Michelle right now in the triple dots over her image, I have the option to spotlight for everyone. And then if I want to, I can go to myself and I can say add spotlight. And then if I want to, I can click on these little buttons again. I can say remove spotlight. And then I'll come to myself. Now that I'm the only thing spotlighted, there's a button and I just hit the button, remove spotlight. There we go. And you'll see that now it switched me over to speaker view. So I have to go up to view in order to switch back to the gallery. So you have to tell your student to do the same thing.
And an answer to your question, Justice, if a technical issue happens during a Zoom lecture, there's not much you can do in the moment. Media Services will provide technical support and you can send them an email, but they're not going to be able to get to in the moment kind of support. So it's always good to have a backup plan. For instance, if Zoom fails, then you can pretty much immediately create like a Google link and send it to your students through the D2L chat feature. But I've not really seen wholesale Zoom collapses, more like people losing their internet connection. I feel like that's been the more common issue over the course of us using Zoom. But that's why it's always good to test the stuff in advance. And if you're like, oh, I really wanted to use this feature and I can't get it to work, then you can send an email to Media Services and have them talk you through it before you're kind of trying to do it live.
Exactly. And the other thing to remember in these kind of workshops, we show you lots of different options to give you options, not because we would expect that people would want to use all of them at once. So I'm trying them all at once so that you don't have to. And you can see how it's, some of it's kind of fallen apart for me already, and it's okay. First of all, they're very forgiving of this and they actually appreciate the humility that comes along with trying new things and having them fail. And I found that to be very true. If you go into the classroom and you say, I'm not sure this is going to work, but let's give it a try. And it falls apart. They're like, as long as you have a backup plan or something else you can do instead, you're all good. But that said, yeah, take what works for you from these workshops. Don't take all of them. So chances are I would do something like, okay, I'm going to take advantage of that spotlight thing. I don't think I'm going to bother with that focus thing or that other thing, but yeah, that spotlight thing will really work for me, right? So hopefully when you pare it down to the things that work best for you, it won't be as daunting as thinking about all the possibilities.
And one more question, Sally. I think this is an interesting one because it never occurred to me. So
Yeah.
when you have the PowerPoint background enabled, can you also then annotate your slide?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think I have the annotation tools, but if there's time at the end, which I have a feeling there will not be, unfortunately, but if that's a question, you can email me too to double check. We can try that out or just try it and let me know if it works. Because yeah, I haven't tried that.
that has a delightful, like, I mean, it's the PowerPoint slide thing. I already feel like a weather person, and I really love like pointing at things and like being like a TV anchor, and being able
Yeah.
to write on it gives it that, like ESPN quarterback kind of analysis where you're drawing the X's and O's and showing where the players ran and stuff. So I hope it works, but we'll have to test it out.
I'd be surprised, but this is in beta again too, so there might be more things coming.
Mhm.
We're also working on a new series of tutorials that should be up momentarily, like really soon. They're pretty much ready to go, on using OBS Studio, which what OBS Studio does is it gives you another layer of presentation tools that you can use in Zoom. So basically you run this sort of like home TV studio software, and then that becomes your camera in Zoom. So you then project that. So that can have a box where your slides are. It can have a box where you have like a tablet set up where you can actually draw on stuff and actually create like your own little chalkboard space. You can make a little window that's the chat so that the chat's always up and running on the main screen. Some people have been using this already at Ryerson. Eric Limberta uses it and did a demo. I know I can't get his name, Chris Alexander uses it, and it's all over the place, very splashy. It doesn't have to be a splashy tool, it can just be a practical tool where if you need to show two things at once on a screen, you can use that. So those tutorials are coming soon. Again, another setup, another trying stuff out before you use it sort of situation, but again, one of those things too that has a minor learning curve, and then once you get used to it, it can open the world of possibilities up. So another thing to play with. Okay, so now over to Michelle to talk about participation.
Sure. So I guess next slide. So there's lots of different ways that you can engage students in a sort of more participatory environment in Zoom. There is a polling feature. One of those things that is kind of a little quirk of Zoom that I wish were different is that you can't really set them up on the fly. So if you want to use polls in your teaching, you have to set them up in advance when you set up the meeting for your class. So when you set up the meeting for your class, you can scroll down to the bottom and add your poll questions, and then you're ready to run them during your class, and you can then display the answers to the students. But it's not something that you can sort of leverage on the fly. On the other hand, I have seen people use the sort of chat feature in a kind of on the fly polling environment where they're like, do you understand this like concept, and then type yes in the chat or no in the chat. And then, like you kind of see very rapidly, even when you have like hundreds of people in a chat, it like kind of scrolls very rapidly, and you can see whether the no's override the yeses, right? So it's an interesting way to kind of on the fly do that kind of polling feature using the chat. Like I said earlier, we have the reactions feature, the screen sharing and whiteboard, and then breakout rooms. And there's a lot of interesting updates in breakout rooms. So you can move forward. So over the course of this time that we've spent on Zoom, I've both witnessed in sort of professional environments and heard back from faculty about different ways that breakout rooms have gone. A lot of times when I've been in like professional conferences, and then the presenter is like, we're going to go to breakout rooms. And then you see like the number of people in the session just like dropping, right? Because people have like an expectation, I think sometimes, that it's not going to be something they necessarily want to participate in. So there's a way that you can sort of foreground the activity and make sure that it's something that the students are really kind of set on doing. The other thing that I've heard is, like that one student is in the breakout room with 3 black squares that are like students that have wandered away. And so one thing that you can kind of do to make sure that this doesn't happen is, like set expectations for what's happening in the breakout rooms and let the students know it's going to happen before class. So it's not like, surprise, we're all going to do this thing, and then they're upset because they didn't, fix their hair, or it's messy behind them, or they don't want their fellow students to see them. Define roles that they're going to have and provide a framework. So, say that there's a very specific task you're going to do. This is an outcome that is expected of you. One person is going to take the role of taking notes, and another person is going to take the role of facilitating the conversation. And then you're going to do this thing together. And create accountability for that, right? So that the students are expected to report back, whether it's in class as a sort of follow-up discussion, or an after class kind of submission in D2L, or as part of an assignment, that they actually have to report back on what they did in their groups. So you give them like a very specific defined task with clear expectations as to what's expected of them, and then some form of accountability in terms of a final product that they're producing. And once students are kind of used to that, they may like get to sort of enjoy working in their groups, but it's really important to to have like a very specific kind of set of outcomes that are defined for what you expect them to do. And you can use group breakout rooms as well to create time for groups to work in together. So say you have a group assignment for your class, you can create predefined groups of the groups that you've created, and then give students time to work on their group project together. And then the one thing I will say, is that what we found over the last year and a half is that things always take more time than you've anticipated when you're doing like a sort of virtual activity. That if you thought an activity that would have taken 5 minutes of students kind of just turning around to talk to the people behind them in class will actually take maybe 10 minutes, because then the time it takes you to set up the breakout rooms, and then for the students to like come back from being black squares and like say hello to each other and kind of adjust to be like talking, like it always takes a bit longer than it would have taken had you been doing it live. So just really adjust for that. Next slide. So the cool new features in Zoom is that you can, so you've always been able to either create random breakout rooms where you set them up on the fly and you say, I want 5 breakout rooms, and it'll tell you, oh, like you'll have about 4 people per breakout room. You can also pre-assign breakout rooms within your Zoom settings. So when you set up your meeting, you can set your students, say if you had the students broken up into pre-existing groups of 5 students, you can put them in using a kind of a CSV file if you have it in a spreadsheet, and say these are my pre-assigned rooms. And the new feature that is really exciting is this self-select feature. So students can move between breakout rooms, or they can choose what breakout rooms to go to. And I've seen a lot of different things done with this that have been very interesting. I went to a U of T Wikipedia edit-a-thon where they set up the main room was just for coming to talk to one of the facilitators and ask questions. So like the room that we're in now. Then one breakout room was for working on a very specific project where they were trying to, like they were advanced Wikipedia users and they were like working on building entries for these, I think, jazz musicians or something like that. Then there was one room for newbies who were gonna have like a rotating set of lessons on how to use Wikipedia. Like someone would restart the lesson like every half hour. So if you were new to Wikipedia, you could go there and you could watch a like, sort of didactic presentation. And then there was like a sort of Q&A room for people to come and ask questions if they had trouble. And so people could like move as they wanted between spaces, depending on if they had questions or they wanted to hang out in one of the other spaces or they wanted to watch the presentation again. I've also seen it done in a conference where there was a question presented to the conference participants and then a set of topics in which you could answer the question like with the specific topic that you were interested in exploring. So then you just selected the topic that you were interested in. So I could see a lot of different ways that you could use this in a class, right? Like if you wanted to give the time to students to work in groups, they could break out into their own groups and they could come back to the main room to ask you questions, or there could be kind of a space for them to just hang out and get to know one another. Like there's lots of different ways that you could think of leveraging this. And
yeah,
you can
I can demo it now if you'd like.
Yeah.
So I can demo it for us so that we can see what that looks like on your end. So I've brought up my toolbar here. Now, if you're not sharing or if you have the full toolbar, breakout rooms will show up along it, but this one's a truncated one, so it's under more. And if I go to breakout rooms, I can set how many ever I want. So I'm going to make breakout rooms. Don't feel like you have to go in them. We're not going into breakout rooms now, so you don't all need to leave and have a mass exodus because I didn't give you those expectations. I'm just going to show you how you set them up. So I'll set them up and I'll launch them, but don't join any of them. Just stay with us. So instead of using assign automatically, which lets you just sort of have random people in each room, there's the assign manually or let people choose. And then of course, if I pre-assigned and I had already set that up, that would show up as an option as well had I added that to this meeting. The great thing about pre-assign that's changed, which was a huge issue for me when I tried them for the first time, is that what it used to do is anyone who was in the call when you first launched the breakout room. So if I launched them early to make sure they were working, for example, and then students kept joining, the ones that joined later didn't get joined to the rooms. So I had to add them all manually. That doesn't happen anymore. If they've been added to a room, and even if they join after the rooms are open and they're all open and going, they'll be asked to join the room that is the one that they were assigned to. So that's a big, great little administrative change that might not seem like a big deal, but it was a huge deal and made it basically that I couldn't use them the way I had them set up for a class of 150. It was just unmanageable. But with the let people choose the room, if I hit create, I will get a box that shows up that has the names of the rooms. But if I hover over them, I can rename the rooms to whatever I want. So just say I decide I'm going to say, okay, join a room based on your favorite color, which is probably the worst way because then everyone goes into blue or whatever color is popular. Probably pink right now, right? I'll rename this one pink. And this one will be green. And then you just tell people to go, they can go into whatever room they want. So I'm going to open these rooms. Don't join a room, but you'll see that you have the option between them all. And you'll see right now I have a list of everyone in the room that's unassigned because you're not joining rooms, so don't join rooms. But if you were, I'd start to see them pop up underneath all of these different ones. What I wanted to show you too, and just remind you, is you have that broadcast message to all option where you can just quickly send a message. In this case, I'm going to say, I'm sharing new information in my slides. Stand by. Okay, and I'm going to broadcast that to all the rooms. And then I'm going to go up to my sharing options. I'm going to choose new share. I'm going to share my slides again, and this time I'm going to say share to breakout rooms, and then that would go to all the breakout rooms. So even if you've already shared your slides, you'll need to go in and share again and check off that box to share it to the breakout rooms, which Monica was just mentioning in the chat seemed like a great new option available to people. So that's how you would share the slides to everyone in every room if you wanted to share, say, some more instructions or something like that.
Sally, sorry to interrupt. There was earlier a question, so this is a good point about broadcasting messages to breakout rooms. And are there any changes? Because it used to be just that pop-up that briefly shows up. Are there any changes the way how this is happening now?
I don't believe so. I think it's still doing the same thing. But then you can also share your slides, which gives you another level of sharing, which should pop up as just a big slide presentation the way it would if you were in the call and you were in the general main room. So that does give you another option, at least, for how you can share. I just find the broadcast is usually for just quick little things like reminders about how much time is left or a quick update to everybody. And nothing is quite the same as actually just joining the room as well. So there's an option as well. And the other big thing about the update is that you can now, if people join and are in the waiting room, you don't have to leave the room to let them in. You can let them in while you're still in a room. So it just gets rid of another step as well. Michelle, I think I'll go over the survey option and yeah, and then I'll hand it over to you for inclusivity and we'll try and wrap this up with a few more minutes. I'm glad we've gotten to questions as we go. So this has worked out pretty well. So I just wanted to also talk about this new survey option that's available. And what it does is it basically allows you to create, sort of using the same poll option, an exit survey. So when people leave the meeting, you can have a survey that goes to them after the event. And the other cool thing about it is it actually lets you connect a Google form or a MailChimp or a few other options as a third-party option as well. So you could do that. But if you use the one that is used internally with Zoom, you have some features such as it generates a report. It can be anonymous, or it can record the participant's name based on the name that they use to join the call. And it also is very similar to the polls feature in terms of the options you have in terms of the types of questions you can ask. So what we've done in this particular call is when you leave, we have a 1-question exit survey for you. And so you can see it's just a sample of what it looks like. So when you leave the call, you'll get asked a question. It's just, do you think you'd use this survey tool in your teaching? It's not a real personal question. We just thought it'd be cool for you to be able to see it in action and see what it looks like. It's set up just like polls are, where once you've set up your meeting, you can then go in and edit the meeting to add one of these. So same ideas with the polls. Yeah, so that's just one more other tool. I know we have more questions coming through. Do we want to to discuss these. Yes, you can add a timer to breakout rooms in terms of how long they last. And you can also add a time for how long they have to get back to the main room. So you can set a timer for like 5 minutes and then say there's 30 minutes like buffer for them to come back to the main room. You can do things like that. Chat functions, we'll get to a couple of updates in this next section because it sort of plays into inclusivity. So I'll hand it over to Michelle and we'll finish off the presentation.
Thanks, Sally. And I'll just try to go through this quickly. There's a few really great features that we just wanted to touch on because they're important for ensuring your classroom is inclusive and accessible. So one of them is enabled right now in this room. It's the automatic captions and transcript function. So it's something that you have to enable at the beginning of the meeting. And so that's why we really wanted to mention it. It's not something the students can turn on by themselves. So once you've enabled it, then any student that wants it can press the CC live transcript button in their toolbar and get an automatic set of captions displayed for themselves. And they can also adjust how those captions display, whether they want bigger text or smaller text. It is an automatic function, so it makes mistakes, and it's depending on how fast you speak or the words that you're using that may be kind of terminology that the program isn't familiar with, but it is a good sort of stopgap option. If you do have a student though with an accommodation, you can reach out to the library for more professional options, but this is just something that's really great for students to have access to. So remember to turn on the live transcript. Next slide. This is a feature that we just enabled at Ryerson. It allows you to automatically add and share your pronouns with people in your meeting. So what you do is you go into your Zoom profile page. So it's like, in zoom.ryerson.us when you log in, and you have the option to change your photo to display to something else. You can now also add your pronouns there, and you can say when you want to share them. So you can sort of define when they appear. And so you can see mine says Michelle Schwartz, she, her. I set that in my profile. So every time I'm logged into Zoom, they'll display in meetings that I'm using. And that's also a really great feature you can just let students know about. I found it very annoying to add them every single time I show up in a meeting. I have to go to my profile, my name, and change my name to display my profile pronouns, while this just does it automatically. So it's a really great new feature to let students know about. And once again, a lot of these features are only available if you have the newest desktop client. So it's always good to include in your course outline and remind the students in D2L, and then remind the students again in your first meeting. Oh, please update your desktop client. Please update your desktop client. I know I often let mine get out of date as well, but it's something that will enable them to do things like join breakout rooms and use the pronouns feature, etc. Next slide. This is a new feature that's similar to virtual backgrounds, which is blurring the background. This is also available in Google Meet. This may not work for some students that have computers or operating systems that don't have enough processing power, but we've just heard again and again from students that they're very sensitive about the environments that they're joining online classes from, or that they don't want their fellow students to see where they live. So you can change your virtual background. And you can have as an option blur instead. So you can kind of see the background of my apartment, but not really. And it's just a feature you can let students know about. I see your question about the pronouns. Okay, there's lots of questions. I'll just finish this and then I'll come back and answer all of them again. I know I'm going fast through this. And then the next slide, Sally. So another thing that you can think about using is the nonverbal feedback and meeting reactions. And this is actually something good to know about, both from sort of inclusivity framework, but also for your own sort of like control of the classroom, a sort of classroom management thing. Zoom has sort of set this ability to have meeting reactions, and there's some really great things about it. So for instance, instead of a kind of default skin tone on the emoji, that's the yellow, kind of Simpsons yellow, you can choose a skin tone. You can also sort of enable all emojis and then let the students kind of speak through their emojis, but you just have to know if you turn on all emojis, there's all the emojis there, right? Because the poop emoji, etc. So you can also set it to just the selected emojis and, restrict them to just sending each other hearts. Yes, thank you. Andrea has sent the vomit emoji. You can see the chaos that you could accidentally unleash by enabling all the emojis. But these are just some of the features that we thought it would be great to highlight, just so you know that they're there. So just to go back to some of the questions, to activate the live transcript, as a host, you will see a button at the bottom that says live transcript along with the breakout rooms and the recordings. And when you click on it, it will give you the option for enabling the live transcript. For setting the pronouns, you go into your Ryerson Zoom profile. So on the ryerson.zoom.us page, where you would be able to, like, say, add your position title or change your profile picture, you'll also see the option to add pronouns now as well. Can you get it? So when you have the closed captions on, are you asking Najina if they are captured in the recording? Sally, do you know if the
I don't believe they are. Instead, what they do, and it's actually good pedagogical practice to not have them burned into the screen, because for some people they're distracting, and also they aren't fully accurate. So if you want to go in and adjust them, if they were burned into the screen, it wouldn't be the best idea. Instead, you still get that transcript as a separate file in your recordings when you record. And you can attach those in your Google Drive so that they show up as a closed caption option. It's a little bit tricky to set up the first time as you learn how to do it. It's not super hard, but you just have to click like a triple dot menu and say add closed caption file and make sure that file's been saved to your drive as well. And then you can make it so it will link and connect and actually show them as captions. So that is a possibility. But again, you might want to go through, depending on how inaccurate it is, sometimes it's good to edit them a bit. I did find that what I ended up doing in my recordings is I would, I'd provide a transcript instead, just because I knew I could do a more accurate transcript. And if needed, I would fix up and get the closed captions. I do whatever I can to do the best, most accurate thing. But if I had students who required that accommodation, I'd be sure to reach out to the library to have something more accurate.
Yeah, and especially if you teach in something with very discipline specific terminology, you may want to just go in. You don't have to necessarily fix like minor spelling errors or formatting or the, little tiny captioning errors, but you could fix if it, I don't know, like whatever it does to sort of scientific terminology. I was just trying to think of a scientific word and I was like, I can't even think of one science word.
I know it's using, Otter's engine, it's AI engine. And I know the more that we go in and correct things, even in if you have an Otter account, if you're using Otter, if you go in and correct things that are incorrectly spelled, it's trying to get smarter all the time. So hopefully it will, the AI will get better and update and the more people in discipline specific stuff do things and correct it, the more it will get it right. But there's always going to be that time when it doesn't. Most automated captioning is at about a 90% accuracy rate, which means 1 out of every 10 words is going to be wrong, right? Which is not great when you think about it that way. 90% sounds so good until you think about, what one word can do out of 10. I'm just going to switch over to show you a couple of resources we have here as we wrap up. And I think Michelle and I are probably free for a little bit to continue answering questions. So we can do that, but I just want to make sure people who have to leave know what's in these slides. We have this sort of quick reference of the stuff we talked about and some of the things we sort of glossed over about what's new. And we also have provided you with some links, including the release notes directly from Zoom, where you can see what's available. Now, some things might not be turned on in our enterprise account. For example, the pronouns. Michelle actually reached out to AV Help to ask if that was something that they could do a security check on and make sure it was okay to turn on, and they did for us. So if you find there's an update and it's not available to you, it might be an enterprise decision by the university related to security, or it could just be something that you need to request and see if they are willing to turn it on. So just a heads up. And then there's a few other resources there as well. Just want to let you know about that before we go back into questions. Nada, did you see something there you think we should address?
Not that I remember, but I just wanted to what Michelle said at the beginning, and it is unfortunate that these backend features cannot be shown once when you're in Zoom. But please reach out. I'll share the link for a one-on-one consult with one of us, and we can help you test. It takes sometimes 15-20 minutes. So just sign up for one of the one-on-one consults with us, and we'll help you walk through these features, test some of them.
Thanks everyone for joining. If you have any more questions, and like Nada said, you can feel free to use our consultation, a link that's on our website. I'm just trying to get back to my screens here. I can actually get my slides back up. There we go. And so feel free to contact us even just through the Teaching Center website or email. You can also follow us at Teaching Center on Twitter, and also the link to the slides is there for you as well. So thanks again for joining us today, and hopefully you have some fun trying out some new things in Zoom. Try it out, join it, get a friend, or if you don't know anyone who wants to join you, you can call us and we'll join you to play around and see what you can do.